the postponement of the tabling on the 2025 budget speech by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has drawn comment from all walks of society, while some say disagreements surrounding budget is par for the course in coalition governments. Others feel the postponement is not merely a fiscal scheduling issue, but a governance failure and far-reaching consequences. A specialist risk consultant, Volker von Widdern, is one of such those voices, and he joins us now via our video link for more on this discussion. Volker, thank you so much for your time this evening here on SABC News. Now, yesterday the budget came, and of course we didn't see it, being followed through by the finance minister. We now know that it's been postponed, and at the center of it all is the issue around that 2% VAT increase. Do you think that it was necessary for this budget to be postponed because of what we know now?
Yes, I mean, we don't really comment on political issues as a risk consultancy, but if the government can't agree on its policy, it would have to be postponed. I don't know how else they would have been able to pass the motion, because it was going to be defeated when it arrived in Parliament.
And, from your perspective, how should, local businesses view this postponement, particularly with the fact that it really does center around, how South Africans would then be living their lives?
Yes, I think that's, when we think about strategic risk, there's been a lot of comment about, let's say, the immediate noise, and it's fair. Nobody likes uncertainty. It was a shock to the system. Normally when there's uncertainty, there's a lot of speculation about the downside or the worst case scenario. And it's good to see that other indicators like the rand-dollar exchange rate is still relatively stable. However, if you ask people, would they be willing to make big investment commitments under these conditions, I think the answer would be different. And so the sooner we return to stability, the better for South Africa and the rest. So from the point of view of viewing the future, I think what we, from a strategic risk analysis, what we do as risk manager is to identify what the issues are and how we can see through them and see both the opportunities for the upside as well as thinking about mitigating the downside. And in that context, the opportunities for business and for South Africa are not only on the downside, there are significant upside opportunities, and they will help if they are applied in terms of addressing the shortfalls in the budget. So that's really how we're trying to look at this situation.
Yeah, and when it comes to, like the fact that you were saying planning for the future, going forward as a country, what does this postponement mean in terms of planning, particularly for a country like ours that really is a struggling economy?
I think the planning point is excellent. Let's say on the one hand, the budget had just gone through and people were just unhappy with it. I think the outcome of that is, again, a lack of appetite for investment, a poor growth scenario, and the rest. Now the planning really has to include making significant changes so that a wider range of opinions are included in what actually happens to the budget. And if that range of opinions includes no tax increases, but the government needs more money, and cash flow to deal with greater social needs and, as we've said, developmental needs, which are essential for economic growth, then the money has to be found in different ways. And that's excellent from a planning point of view, because what are those different ways? And it's not simply, in this case, raising tax. Again, we look at it from a risk, but also opportunity point of view. There are many other ways of raising funds in this climate, and we've proven it in South Africa in our toll roads, in our concessions, in the renewable power industry, where hundreds of billions of assets are being built on effectively a build, operate, and transfer model. So there's more than enough money around. And what should be then be considered is, instead of putting everything through a revenue budget, like we have now, the planning should then say, how do we split the budget from a revenue only to a revenue and capital additions budget, and then treat the capital projects from a planning point of view completely separately. those capital projects then should be run on a private and public sector partnership basis, which we're very familiar with. We have them. We have the toll roads. We have many of those items in place already. So these are not scary things. But from a planning point of view, the fundamental commitment to getting those major capital projects done with the private sector is what now needs to come into the planning environment. And it took this crisis, I think, to move the thinking into that direction.
And as you talk about planning, and you talk particularly to the fact that, we would have seen that 2% VAT increase being announced yesterday by the Minister of Finance, but he's been sent back to the drawing board. And one would also ask then, how was this proposal of this 2% VAT increase, how was it going to really impact, South Africans from a risk perspective?
The biggest risk, as we saw happen in Kenya, is that a very unpopular tax led to a high level of social unrest. So one, it hits the South Africans in the pocket, but when it makes them so unhappy, we have extremely unfortunate experience ourselves of what happened in primarily KZN a few years ago. So we know that South Africans are under pressure, and we don't really want excuses for people to be mobilized negatively and destroy the environment around them and have massive social unrest and pressure. So on the one side, that is the case. But the point is that because we want to avoid that, we should be looking for different solutions. And as I say, if we look at the budget, the 2% VAT is about 60 billion in revenue per annum. Now, if you look at what else is being provided for in the budget, such as a Transnet bailout and support for local authorities because they don't have enough money, the capital projects that I'm talking about more than make up for those revenue amounts that we're looking for. So if we had a different strategy on developing the sources of funding outside of the current revenue stream, but there's a financial term, for example, called a sale and leaseback. So there are literally hundreds of billions of assets in the state sector that could be shared in the private sector on the basis of developing capacity. We are desperate for capacity in the rail sector, in the ports and the like. We would love to develop our tourism sector more and more power. All of those areas have got money waiting to be invested in them. And so we don't need the 60 billion in VAT. If we find the 60 billion in terms of investments, the state can spend its money on social services and investors can spend their money building the country's infrastructure.
All right.
And that avoids the risk of the community being so unhappy with the 2% VAT increase.